the podcaster Candace Owens. And she is making a huge amount of money on it. She is building her business off of these lies. What do you want to say to her and the other people that are putting these lies out into the world right now?
Stop. That's it.
Imagine this, a political movement loses its biggest megaphone, and the very next thing that happens is a flood of money, a flood of cameras, and a flood of stop asking questions. Now toss in Candace Owens claiming Donald Trump is quietly helping Erika Kirk keep things contained, and suddenly the story smells less like closure and more like Febreze over a dumpster fire. Because if everything is clean, transparent, and solved, why does everyone act like curiosity is a felony? Alright, strap in. Here are the 10 biggest flashpoints driving the Trump is protecting Erika handler narrative online. What's claimed, what's known, and why people can't stop arguing about it. 1. The case is real, and the stakes are nuclear. This is the part where the story stops being commentary drama and turns into courtroom gravity. Charlie Kirk's killing on September 10th, 2025 isn't a vague internet rumor. It's a real criminal case with a named suspect, serious charges, and prosecutors saying they've got receipts in the form of a note, texts, and forensic evidence. And once the state starts floating the death penalty lane, everything changes. Now every sentence matters, every clip gets replayed, and every missing detail becomes a magnet for speculation, because the public doesn't hear capital case and think calm, orderly process. The public hears capital case and thinks, okay, so who's controlling the story, and why do I feel like I'm being handed the plot summary instead of the full book? And that's the recipe for a national obsession. High-profile tragedy plus political tension plus a justice system that moves like it's buffering at 1%. Prosecutors say they're building a case, the public starts building theories. Meanwhile, the death penalty reality means this won't be wrapped up with a neat bow anytime soon. These cases are expensive, slow, and legally dense, which leaves a lot of time for people to argue online like it's a sport. So yes, the case is real, the stakes are massive, and in America, when the stakes get massive, people don't just ask what happened, they ask who benefits, because everybody suspects somebody's cashing in, somebody's covering up, or somebody's curating the truth like it's a highlight reel. And when the stakes are nuclear, the first thing everybody starts sniffing for is motive. 2. Candace Owens didn't start with who pulled the trigger. Candace Owens started with money. Candace Owens didn't walk into this story like a detective with a trench coat and a magnifying glass. Candace Owens walked in like an accountant with a calculator and a side eye. Because the first investigation wasn't about ballistics or suspects, it was about incentives. The logic that hooks audiences isn't Candace Owens solved the crime, it's when a movement loses its most famous face and the money starts raining down like a Vegas slot machine just hit triple cherries, it's fair to ask who benefits. That question isn't proof, but it's the kind of question that makes powerful people suddenly start speaking in therapy phrases. This isn't healthy. Let's not speculate. We're focusing on healing, and my personal favorite, stop. Money doesn't just change the conversation, it changes the temperature in the room. The moment finances enter the chat, everybody gets stiff, everybody gets polite, and everyone suddenly remembers they left the oven on. And that's why the who benefits framing turns a tragedy into an online war, because it drags the story out of the emotional lane and into the incentive lane, where reputations, fundraising, careers, and influence all live. Once you're talking incentives, you're no longer just talking about grief, you're talking about power, and power loves darkness like a vampire loves a blackout curtain. So the internet does what it always does. It points at the money, screams grifter, and starts treating every public statement like a sales pitch disguised as a eulogy. That's the tension headache. Candace's angle doesn't need to prove every detail to go viral. It just needs to make people feel like the official vibe is too polished, too rehearsed, too brand safe. Because when a story is truly clean and complete, it doesn't panic when people ask questions. It just answers them. And the moment money gets said out loud, the next word that shows up is always grifter. 3. The stop moment didn't feel like closure. Online, it felt like a command. The stop moment didn't land like a grieving widow drawing a healthy boundary. It landed like the principal catching you in the hallway and saying, "We are not discussing that." And the internet, being the internet, reacted the only way it knows how, by immediately discussing it harder. Because stop is a magical word online. It doesn't end conversations, it starts conspiracy cardio. It's not a fire extinguisher, it's lighter fluid in a spray bottle. And viewers heard it in stereo, one ear heard stop because this is cruel, and the other ear heard stop because you're stepping on a wire. And once the audience senses a wire, they don't back away. They start doing that thing where they just have questions, but the questions are shaped like accusations and typed in all caps at 2:13 a.m. And here's the suspense part. Stop doesn't tell the public what's true. It tells the public what's off limits. And in a story where people already feel like the timeline is fuzzy and the messaging is curated, off limits feels like a neon sign that says important item behind glass. So instead of closure, stop becomes the ignition switch for a new obsession. If the goal is to calm the situation, why does the response feel like a shutdown instead of a clarification? Why is the public being scolded instead of reassured? That's how the internet turns one word into a whole season arc, because stop didn't end the rumor mill. It gave it a slogan, a soundtrack, and a reason to keep watching the next episode. And right after stop, the next thing audiences noticed was who got to speak and who got sidelined. 4. Erika Kirk stepped into the spotlight fast, and critics called it a takeover. In this version of the story, Erika Kirk doesn't fade into the background. Erika Kirk becomes the background. Like the organization is a theater production and someone yelled places, and grief got shoved into wardrobe with a polite note. We'll circle back. Supporters see it as strength. Erika Kirk is showing up, holding it together, keeping the mission alive. But critics hear the theme music of a PR rollout. Why does this feel like a rebrand happening in real time? Because the average person thinks a tragedy pauses the schedule. This didn't look pause, it looked optimized. And the internet is allergic to anything that resembles optimization during mourning. That's how you end up with viewers asking, wait, are we watching grief or are we watching a brand protect its market share? And the suspense comes from the gap between what people want to believe and what the optics suggest. Because if Erika Kirk steps forward too fast, it reads like urgency. If Erika Kirk steps back, it reads like hiding. It's a no-win maze where every hallway leads to a comment section with pitchfork emojis. But what really turbocharges suspicion is the contrast with the usual playbook. Interim leader, quiet weeks, internal stabilization, then a measured transition. Instead, audiences think they're watching a fast handoff where the public face is installed before the public even processes what happened. And once that feeling takes hold, people don't just question the leadership. They start questioning the timing, the tone, the messaging, and whether the organization is protecting a legacy or protecting itself. Which is exactly why the next beat hits like a jump scare in a docuseries. The public forgiveness moment, the one that makes half the audience say faith and the other half say, hold up, what? And then came the moment that made viewers spit out their coffee. Forgiveness. Public forgiveness. 5. The public forgiveness moment became a personality Rorschach test. The memorial forgiveness moment hit the internet like someone dropped a choose your fighter screen into a church service. Half the audience went, wow, faith, grace, spiritual maturity, I could never. The other half went, hold on, forgiveness already? We didn't even finish the opening credits. And that's the thing about a public forgiveness moment. It's either holy or it's suspicious, depending on what kind of trauma your algorithm fed you last week. Because once you forgive publicly, you don't just make a spiritual statement, you make an optics statement. And optics are basically gasoline in a culture that thinks every headline is a puzzle and every facial expression is a confession. So now the internet isn't watching for facts, it's watching for tells. Like it's the World Series of lie detection and everybody suddenly has a PhD in body language from TikTok University. And after that, everything becomes a sign. The way a bad relationship makes everything feel like a sign. A smile, PR, a packed schedule, damage control, a calm tone, too calm, a private moment, hiding, a public moment, performing. You can't win because the audience isn't asking, what would a grieving widow do? They're asking, what would a character in a political thriller do? And when the story already feels high stakes, the internet starts auditing vibes like a forensic accountant audits receipts, line by line, eyebrow by eyebrow. That's how a single forgiveness clip turns into a fandom war. Not because people watched an event, but because they watched a feeling and decided it had fingerprints on it. And that's exactly why the next detail hits like a plot twist. If Candace Owens and Erika Kirk had history, then this isn't just commentary anymore. It's personal proximity colliding with public narrative. And once the vibe audit started, people dug up the most inconvenient detail. Candace Owens and Erika Kirk weren't strangers. 6. The relationship history became gasoline. In the narrative you shared, online attention spikes after people notice Candace Owens and Erika Kirk appearing together in older photos, raising questions about what the relationship actually was. That detail matters matters because it changes the psychology. If Candace Owens is totally outside the circle, then Candace Owens is attacking from the outside. If Candace Owens had proximity to the circle, then Candace Owens becomes the insider who knows where the bodies are buried. And the internet loves nothing more than a supposed insider who suddenly started asking questions. And that leads to the next escalation: institutional framing, turning Candace Owens into the villain of the story. 7. The media moment that felt like a spotlight also felt like a warning. So the segment drops and suddenly it's not "let's examine claims." It's "ladies and gentlemen, tonight's episode, stop talking, peasant edition." The camera doesn't just shine a light, it aims the light like a laser pointer at Candace Owens, while the audience's emotional support chihuahua starts barking. And whether the framing is fair or not, the effect is automatic. Candace Owens becomes the plot problem. The attention shifts from "what happened" to "why is Candace Owens doing this?", which is the media equivalent of someone spilling a drink at your party and the host screaming at you for asking who knocked the table. And the minute the conversation becomes "Candace Owens is the problem," you've successfully moved the public away from the mess on the floor and onto the person pointing at the mess. Congratulations! You've turned a timeline debate into a vibe trial. And the vibe trial has rules. The good characters grieve quietly, forgive quickly, and buy the book. The bad character keeps asking questions and makes everyone's dinner uncomfortable. It's basically a morality play where the villain isn't a suspect, it's curiosity, because if you can convince the audience that questions are disrespect, you don't need to answer them, you just need to shame them. And that's why this moment feels like a warning shot in your narrative. It trains the entire ecosystem. It tells influencers, commentators, and even regular viewers, notice how fast we turn the spotlight from the story to the speaker. Yeah, that can happen to you too. Then the suspense spikes, because right when the audience expects an explosive, public, receipts on the table showdown, the story does the one thing that makes the internet's conspiracy engine rev like a Mustang. It goes private, it goes quiet, it goes "we'll handle this offline." And the internet hears that and goes, "Oh, so we're doing closed door vibes now. Interesting." And right when viewers expected a public showdown, the story did something that always makes the internet suspicious. It went behind closed doors. 8. Turning Point USA teased a public response, then the schedule changed. In the script you shared, Turning Point USA announces a live stream to address claims, suggests participation. Then later the plan shifts and the focus becomes a private meeting. And here's why that matters online. When someone says everything will be answered publicly, and then the plan becomes private conversation, audiences assume one of two things. The private meeting is sincere conflict resolution. The private meeting is temperature control, a way to cool down the story while the spotlight is still hot. And then we get the line that launched 1,000 comments, the on hold announcement. 9. Public discussions are on hold sounded strategic. In the text you shared, Erika Kirk announces an in-person private meeting and says public discussion, live streams, and tweets are on hold until after the meeting. That single move is why so many viewers became conspiracy prone, even if viewers aren't conspiracy minded. A public dispute suddenly goes quiet. A major critic pauses content. Everyone waits. It reads like a reset, and resets always trigger the internet's ancient instinct. Somebody got to somebody. And then Candace Owens posts the most unintentionally terrifying phrase possible. 10. I'm alive. Candace Owens didn't just update, Candace Owens signaled. In your shared narrative, Candace Owens appears after the meeting saying "I'm alive," calling the conversation productive and promising a rundown later, while commenters interpret the tone shift in all sorts of ways. That's the moment the Donald Trump protection TPUSA desert handler claim finds oxygen, because audiences connect dots like a conspiracy-themed IKEA manual. The story goes private. Candace Owens returns sounding careful. Fans speculate pressure. Candace Owens claims Trump is quietly keeping Erika Kirk protected in conservative media ecosystems. And here's the key. None of that proves a cover-up, but all of that does explain why millions of people feel like the narrative is being managed instead of answered. So here's the real question. If the official story is strong enough to stand on its own, why does every attempt to recheck the timeline trigger rage instead of reassurance? Drop a comment with the cleanest explanation, normal chaos, or narrative control. Hit like if questions aren't disrespect, silence is. Subscribe if you want breakdowns that follow receipts and timelines, not vibes and talking points. Because the moment everyone demands you move on, that's usually the moment the real story starts.